Lord of Mysteries. My Identities echoes across time chapter 381 to 390. Indeed, the enormous golden orb in the sky, which looks like a miniature sun, is a sealed artifact created by Lynn. He worked on it overnight after deciding to support Mr. Fool in Silver City, mainly utilizing the abilities of the sun pathway. Previously, when Lynn had a confrontation with the eternal blazing sun, he collected a significant amount of blood for analysis. This enabled him to create an artifact that, although only capable of emitting light without any other functions, is perfectly suited for the forsaken land of the gods. Originally, Lynn intended to craft a true miniature version of the sun. However, despite his efforts, he was unsuccessful. While it's possible to maintain a sun that produces a large amount of heat and allows plants to perform photosynthesis for a short period, doing so for an extended time would require continuously infusing it with a substantial amount of sun pathway energy or using the characteristics of a sequence 2 sun pathway meander as the core. If he used only spiritual materials or other characteristics as the core, the best he could achieve would be a glowing artifact that lasts a few days. Although Lynn was tempted to complain about how such meander matters still adhere to the law of conservation of energy, he ultimately had to abandon the idea of a true miniature sun. In the end, Lynn could only create what is essentially a large light bulb that emits light without heat and cannot allow the people of Silver City to grow crops. It cannot provide the kind of sunlight necessary for plant growth, a light bulb, in the truest sense. However, this miniature sun isn't entirely useless. At the very least, as a large light bulb, it can dispel the darkness of Silver City, raising its security level. The darkness of the forsaken land of the gods is incredibly dangerous, teeming with countless monsters and anomalies. Once an ordinary meander is swallowed by the darkness, they typically cannot return within seconds, only facing death or transformation into a monster. Therefore, this miniature sun is still of great use to the people of Silver City. However, if they wish to improve their diet in the future, they'll still have to rely on Frank's mushrooms. As Lynn's thoughts wandered, recalling the strange mushrooms described in the original work, he smiled and turned to Colin Iliad, saying, "I hope you like this gift." "Thank you immensely for your gift, Your Highness, Angel of Secrets." Colin bowed deeply, expressing sincere gratitude. He could hardly believe it. The first time an Angel of the Fool descended, they granted them a son. Even though it's only a miniature sun, it's incredibly precious to the people of Silver City. Not only does it provide protection, ensuring they won't be devoured by the monsters lurking in the darkness, but it also represents hope for the people of Silver City, who have lived for over 2,500 years without a response from the gods, facing despair at every turn. Standing on the edge of a cliff isn't the most terrifying thing, losing hope is. No need to thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank Mr. Fool. I'm only here on his orders. Lynn smiled, seizing the opportunity to advertise for a certain Mr. Fool before pretending to praise him. Praise the fool. Praise the fool. Colin lowered his head. Although he still hadn't completely let go of his caution toward the angel before him and the fool he had never met, he couldn't deny that, at that moment, the balance in his heart tilted. Perhaps this Mr. Fool really could bring salvation to Silver City. Above the gray fog, the fool Klein watched this scene unfold via the live broadcast. Well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that an angel would stir up such a big commotion. Klein rubbed his forehead, finding the development a bit absurd but unable to suppress a smile. Silver City now has a sun, even if it's just a small one that only provides light. Colin naturally had no idea that the mighty Mr. Fool was watching the broadcast. He restrained his emotions and, with a respectful tone, asked Lynn, "Your Highness, does Mr. Fool require Silver City to do anything?" Although he held onto a glimmer of hope, Colin was also deeply aware that there's no such thing as a free lunch, especially from a god. Even though he was delighted by the miniature sun, he was more concerned about what they might need to give in return. No need to be so tense. The Fool is a benevolent god. This is just a gift to mark our first meeting. Lynn could easily read Colin's concerns, making him chuckle and casually respond, "If Silver City really feels the need to repay this, then offer your faith." Colin wasn't surprised by this response. He replied with a devout tone, "I will offer my faith to Mr. Fool." Lynn glanced at him, neither exposing the performative nature of his devout tone nor pointing out that while he spoke of Silver City's faith, the chief was only referring to his personal faith. Lynn understood that, despite the gratitude Colin felt, he couldn't easily hand over the faith of the entire city's people, even after this display. They would need to confirm things further. After all, even the evil gods these days know to package themselves nicely before trying to deceive people. If Colin Iliad were any less cautious, Silver City would have fallen long ago. Lynn wasn't concerned about this. He looked at the chief's seemingly calm but truly tense expression and laughed softly. Don't be so tense. I know what you're worried about. The fool is a benevolent god who won't force anyone to change their faith. Colin bowed his head even lower, cold sweat soaking most of his back. Lynn, however, didn't look at him any longer. Instead, he turned to Derek beside him and smiled, saying, You must be the little son. I've heard the Pope mention you. Huh, the Pope mentioned me. Little son Derek blinked, looking surprised and a little embarrassed as he heard the Angel of Secrets speak to him. Yes, he said you're a good child. Now that I see you, it seems he was right, Lynn smiled warmly. Derek's smile became even more embarrassed. He scratched his head, looking at the Angel of Secrets before him, and couldn't help but curiously ask, Your Highness, are you very familiar with the Pope? Hearing this direct question, Lynn didn't react much, but Colin, who had just been relieved that Lynn wasn't upset with his cautiousness, broke out in cold sweat again. Although he had some expectations, the chief truly didn't understand how Derek managed to treat an angel with such a casual attitude. Did he really think angels will remain so benevolent? End of chapter. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Fortunately, Colin Iliad felt relieved once again, as the Angel of Secrets, whether a benevolent entity or not, he did not get angry at Derek's straightforward question. Lynn merely gave a subtle smile and said, I am indeed quite familiar with him, perhaps, intimately acquainted, would be more accurate. The little son, Derek, was a bit surprised upon hearing this and then suddenly realized the truth. No wonder the Pope knows so much about hidden knowledge. It turns out he has such a close relationship with the Angel of Secrets. Colin, while listening, silently noted Lynn's words, categorizing them as critical intelligence related to the fool. He then respectfully said, Your Excellency, the City of Silver has already prepared accommodations for both of you. Do you wish to rest? Although he was somewhat skeptical about the information provided by Derek, Colin still instructed his people to set up a sanctuary according to ancient texts on how to receive angels, as a precaution. However, due to the limited resources in the City of Silver, the sanctuary was rather simple and modest. There was no other choice. After all, the people of the City of Silver still lived in stone houses and ate black-faced grass. You couldn't expect such a group of people to build a resplendent cathedral in just a few days, nor could you ask them to prepare a feast. No need, we are not here for pleasure, Lynn added in his mind, besides, there's nothing much to enjoy here. Lynn then waved his hand in the air, and a pile of items appeared on the empty ground nearby. These were North Continent specialties prepared for the City of Silver, including but not limited to albums, photographs, books documenting the outside world, and preserved foods. To prevent the City of Silver residents from not understanding the languages of the outside world, they had bought as many books in Jotun, the current common language of the City of Silver, as possible. For those without Jotun versions, Lynn had prepared dictionaries and materials for learning various common languages of the continent, including Loan. After all, the residents of the City of Silver would eventually need to learn these things, unless they didn't plan to leave the city. Your Excellency, Angel of Secrets, are these things from the outside world? Colin could roughly discern what these items were, causing his voice to tremble slightly. The City of Silver had not had contact with the outside world for so long, or rather, until today, the City of Silver wasn't even sure if there was still an outside world. But the arrival of the angels, along with these books and food scattered on the ground, was the most powerful proof. So, there truly exists a world of light, and the City of Silver has indeed been abandoned by God. No, even if abandoned by God, they would still find their way back to the world of light. Colin clenched his fists silently, his resolve stronger than ever. Yes, these things are indeed from the world of light. Lynn did not deny it. He nodded, looked at Colin, and suddenly sighed, saying, I am sorry, our Lord has not truly returned yet. Even I, as an angel, am limited and unable to bring you back to the world of light. Hearing this, Colin looked up at him in near astonishment, but his expression turned to shock upon hearing the next sentence. But don't worry, you won't have to wait too long in this darkness. When the fool fully returns, a messenger will descend to help you return to the world of light. By then, I hope you will become true believers of our Lord. Lynn said this while gazing in a certain direction, toward the giant king's court, the true exit of the Forsaken Land. At this moment, Colin was too stunned to notice where Lynn was looking. He pursed his lips tightly, evidently struggling internally, but still managed to ask, Your Excellency, is what you said true? Lynn did not answer. He continued to look in the direction of the giant king's court, even though from this distance, there was nothing to see. Yet, Lynn couldn't help but recall the original story and think of the lingering malice of Saussure. Is the true creator equivalent to Saussure? Lynn still hadn't truly found the answer. He only respected Saussure's former wishes, hence acknowledging the current true creator. But just as he had never called the true creator by the name Saussure, it was hard to say what Lynn truly thought. He indeed wouldn't dwell on the distinction between the two after receiving Saussure's answer, but that didn't stop Lynn from gazing at the giant king's court, as if through time and space, he could see Saussure quietly sleeping within. Sigh. Lynn suddenly sighed, with an indescribable emotion. He then looked back at Colin, once again smiling, and said, You can consider it a promise. Whether you believe it or not is up to you. But, Lynn's expression suddenly turned serious, making both Colin and Derek tense up. The fool does not favor believers who passively wait for salvation, nor does he want his believers to give up their efforts just because divine intervention is on the way. Therefore, I hope you understand that even with the fool's blessings, you still need to strive to save yourselves, rather than fall into complacency. Lynn spoke earnestly. While he didn't mind giving the residents of the City of Silver a buff, he certainly didn't want these people to start relying solely on the fool. After all, the final breakthrough wouldn't just require the fool's effort, it also depended heavily on the City of Silver's own efforts. Please rest assured, the City of Silver will never fall into the habit of passively waiting for divine rescue. No matter what, we will not give up on saving ourselves. Even without divine miracles, the City of Silver will continue to strive for the path to the world of light. Colin didn't quite know what came over him, he responded almost reflexively. After answering, he realized that his words might not have been as respectful as they should have been. He wanted to make amends, but then he saw the angel before him smile, seemingly very pleased, so the chief swallowed his words. Then keep that attitude. Remember, God helps those who help themselves. Lynn patted the City of Silver's chief on the shoulder. He initially wanted to pat his head, but the people of the City of Silver were simply too tall, so he settled for a shoulder pat. Now, take these things back. Although they aren't much, they can at least give you an idea of what the outside world is like, a bit of preparation. Lynn said, then remembered something and added, by the way, because there are other matters to attend to, the War Angel and I won't stay here for long. If there's anything you need our help with, let me know during this time. For example, Lynn glanced in a certain direction and said, you might need a bit of help when exploring that ruin. Colin froze for a moment, then realized which ruin Lynn was referring to. He hesitantly asked, Your Excellency, is there something special about that ruin? Well, how to put it, there you will encounter the first guest from the outside world, Lynn said with a smile, dropping a bombshell, the clues to the road leading out of here are with them. End of chapter. The clue to the path leading to the outside world lies in the ruins recently explored by Silver City. Are there actually people from the outside world there? At this moment, Colin's heart was undoubtedly filled with shock, but amidst this shock, there was also a hint of excitement. After all, whether the fool can bring the people of Silver City back to the light in the future is still an unknown. Compared to the uncertain future, Colin prefers a hope that can be grasped within a visible time frame. But how did His Highness know about this? Colin was puzzled but restrained himself from asking directly. However, the little son, Derek, who was beside him, was obviously not someone who could hold back his questions. He couldn't help but ask. Your Highness, how did you know there are guests from the outside world in those ruins? Have you already been there? As soon as this question was asked, Colin immediately felt a wave of anxiety for Derek. He really couldn't understand how Derek could be so bold. I've only seen this part of the future, Lynn said with a smile. Prophecy is one of the authorities I possess. Wow. Derek was evidently amazed. Then you must know everything. No, although I possess the authority of prophecy, I am not omniscient. I can only glimpse parts of the future, Lynn replied modestly with a smile. He reached out and patted Derek's head, but some of that future happens to involve you. Derek was momentarily stunned, clearly growing nervous. He hesitated, but eventually asked with a mix of trepidation and anticipation, Your Highness, can you tell me what you saw about my future? Of course, not. Spoilers are unethical, Lynn said with a smile, mischievously teasing the little son before him. Derek was taken aback, he clearly hadn't expected such an answer, or that Lynn would joke with him in this manner. Derek, since His Highness has said that he cannot reveal your future, you should not trouble him further, Colin suddenly interjected, subtly moving Derek behind him and speaking respectfully, Your Highness, thank you for informing us of this. We may indeed need your assistance in exploring those ruins. However, may we ask if there is anything we can offer in return? Although Colin chose to seek help from the Angel of Secrets to be safe, he understood the principle that the free things are the most expensive. Clearly, Colin was not comfortable accepting such help without offering something in return. Lynn glanced at him and smiled. This time, he did not refuse the goodwill of Silver City's leader. After all, he knew that if he declined again, Colin might become restless. So Lynn smiled and said, the historical records of Silver City should be relatively well preserved, right? Except for the records related to the angels who followed the Creator, Silver City's historical records have remained uninterrupted, Colin replied honestly, without hiding anything, although when mentioning the earlier point, the leader couldn't help but observe the expression of the Angel of Secrets before him. Only the records concerning the Creator's angels have been lost. Lynn naturally noticed the other's observation, but he continued to smile. Colin, seeing this, replied, yes, possibly due to certain accidents during the early stages of the cataclysm, Silver City's records on this part were lost long ago. Colin explained straightforwardly. He didn't know why Silver City, which had worshipped the Creator for generations, lost a significant portion of the records related to the angels who followed the Creator. Reason suggested that there might be some hidden secret, but the previous situation in Silver City didn't allow him to investigate further. It seems that you were not completely ignorant about that war back then. Lynn suddenly commented, seemingly to himself, after hearing Colin's explanation. Although there was no direct evidence, Lynn suspected that Silver City, which had preserved all other records intact and continued to worship the ancient sun god, likely destroyed those records about the 8 kings of angels themselves. Silver City was certainly unlikely to have participated in the rebellion against the ancient sun god by the 3 gods. This had nothing to do with loyalty and was simply because they were not on that level. So Lynn speculated that the situation back then was probably that the high-ranking members of Silver City, being one of the city-states closest to the Giant King's court, might have learned some information about the fall of the Creator or cataclysm, such as parts of the Rose of Redemption's intelligence, or even witnessed fragments of it. In short, the high-ranking members of Silver City might have known that some of the 8 kings of angels betrayed the ancient sun god, but they couldn't confirm exactly who had done so. In fact, just like Afternoon Town, since they didn't have complete information, it's possible that from Silver City's perspective, it seemed as though all 8 kings of angels had been seduced by the Evernight goddess and betrayed the Creator, leaving them with no choice but to destroy most of the records concerning the kings of angels. This would explain why, even after the fall, Silver City never abandoned its faith in the Creator until they encountered the Fool, yet had little knowledge about the kings of angels who served the Creator. Hearing Lynn's words, Colin's pupils shrank. He clearly made some connections, hesitated for several seconds, and then asked, Your Highness, what war are you referring to? Now it was Lynn's turn to hesitate, unsure whether he should reveal more. Is it too early to tell Silver City that the Creator is dead? Ha! What's there to hesitate about? Medici, who had been silent and almost invisible all this time, sneered. His blood-red eyes focused on Colin, his expression slightly cold, though not directed at the latter. Little man, do you want to know the truth of that time? Do you want to know why this place became engulfed in darkness? Yes, Your Highness, War Angel, I want to know the truth of that time. Despite the overwhelming aura of Medici, enough to make most people crumble under his gaze, Collins managed to maintain his composure and responded firmly. Colin knew that today might be the closest he would ever get to uncovering the truth of the cataclysm, and why the Creator abandoned them. So, even if it might involve risks, Colin hoped to get answers from these two angels who once served the Creator. End of chapter. A war once took place. The reason isn't something you need to know, but you should be aware that during that war, the Wind Angel, the Wisdom Angel, and the White Angel betrayed the Creator. It was their betrayal that led to everything that followed, plunging this land into eternal darkness, Medici said, his gaze cold as he looked at Colin Iliad and continued. To be honest, since the Creator doesn't care whether you change your faith, I'm not inclined to concern myself with whom you choose to believe in. But remember this, if you dare to place your faith in those three traitors, I will make you regret your choice. Colin was speechless. The amount of information in Medici's words was overwhelming, even for the firm-willed chief of Silver City. The revelation shook him to his core. However, in his agitated state, he overlooked some of Medici's choice of words. Medici, say no more, Lynn said, his expression somewhat resigned. He then turned to Colin, whose expression remained composed, though it was clear his mind was reeling. Lynn asked, do you have any questions? Since Medici has revealed the truth, I can also tell you some of the facts you are allowed to know. Many questions swirled in Colin's mind, accumulated over countless years, but in the end, he could only muster the courage to ask, as the Creator, still alive. Colin knew he probably shouldn't ask this question, that it might anger the two angels before him. But he needed to confirm this matter. Of course, Colin wouldn't have asked if he hadn't had some confidence. On the one hand, these two angels appeared to have already pledged themselves to a new deity. On the other hand, from what he had observed so far, Colin had deduced that these two angels and the fool they served might not harbor ill intentions toward Silver City. He wasn't certain if they had any plans regarding Silver City, but at least in this situation, even if his question was inappropriate, the one who would suffer would be him alone, not the entire city. Lynn looked at the giant-like chief of Silver City and finally sighed, the Creator you once worshipped has indeed fallen. Colin's body shook. It was hard to describe how he felt at that moment. Even though he had prepared himself and had guessed it countless times, when the truth was laid bare before him, Colin found that he could not remain calm. The Creator had truly fallen. Medici watched this unfold but, surprisingly, did not dispute it, nor did he argue that the true Creator was still the Creator. He fell into an uncharacteristic silence, a complex expression crossing his face, though it was soon replaced by his usual mocking smile. This caused Lynn to glance at him a few more times, but he, too, said nothing, merely waiting for Colin to regain his composure. As the chief of Silver City, Colin did not allow himself to lose composure for long before the two angels. In fact, it only took him a few seconds to calm down. My deepest apologies, Your Highnesses. I was out of line. It's fine, I understand, Lynn replied, naturally not blaming the chief of Silver City. However, he did not offer much comfort either, merely smiling as he asked, is there anything else you wish to know? Colin was silent for a moment before shaking his head. No, I have nothing else I wish to know. He still had many questions. He wanted to know what had happened during the War of the Gods, about the betrayal of the three angels, the Creator's fall, and why this land was abandoned. He also wanted to know how the two angels before him came to serve another deity. But these truths seemed meaningless at this moment. Rather than digging deeper, Colin chose to let the matter rest. If the opportunity arose in the future, Colin still wished to explore the truth of these events. But today, he decided not to directly question the two angels before him. These were not truths that could be directly asked about. Seeing this, Lynn simply smiled and changed the subject. I'm very interested in the records kept by Silver City. If you have the time, could you help me copy and organize a collection of history from the second epoch to the present? Whether it be historical records or folklore, it would be helpful. I understand. I will arrange for the history you require to be copied as soon as possible, Colin replied with his head bowed. Upon hearing the angel's request, he felt a strange sense of relief. The fall of the ancient sun god was truly a tragedy. In Backland, Lynn, who was multitasking and managing several alternate identities, suddenly sighed. He then stretched and glanced out at the bright sunlight. So next, I'll have to convince those fools in the Aurora Order to mend their ways. Tisk, wasn't I supposed to be taking it easy with my main account? Why does it feel like even my main account has turned into a workaholic? Lynn couldn't help but complain, though he knew that even with his divine avatar still in Silver City, his main account had real work to do. Multitasking, it's the signature trait of someone with multiple accounts. So, not long after, the Backland branch of the Aurora Order received a special visitor. You must be Mr. A, the one in charge of the Aurora Order members in the Backland region. Lynn sat on the sofa, sipping the tea that had already been prepared, as he sized up the young man kneeling before him. Just as described in the original text, Mr. A indeed possessed a good appearance that most would envy. Even among the many handsome men and beautiful women Lynn had seen, Mr. A stood out. This led Lynn to silently complain once more about the true creator's preference for good-looking people. But then again, none of the people I want to recruit are unattractive. Lynn suddenly remembered something and fell silent, a thought crossing his mind about his own preference for appearances. Yes, Your Excellency. I am Mr. A, Mr. A responded, unaware of the thoughts running through Lynn's mind. His expression was one of fervent devotion as he said, in accordance with the divine message from the Creator, from now on, including myself, all members of the Aurora Order in Backland will follow your orders, Your Excellency. At this, Lynn set aside his minor internal dilemma, smiled, and looked at Mr. A. In that case, start doing charity work. Establish a charitable organization and save as many lives as you can. Yes, End of chapter. In that case, start doing charity work. Establish a charitable organization and save as many lives as you can. For a moment, Mr. A wondered if he was on the verge of losing control, causing him to hallucinate. Otherwise, how could he hear the Lord's envoy telling them, the members of the Aurora Order, to engage in charity? After all, they were members of the Aurora Order, a secret organization infamous for always taking the blame, whether actively or passively, whenever any terrorist attack occurred. It could be said that the Aurora Order might not be the worst of the secret organizations in the world, but they were certainly the most notorious. They were truly adept at causing trouble and taking the blame. Precisely because of this, Mr. A was almost dumbfounded when he heard Lynn's command. If it weren't for the divine message still imprinted in his mind, confirming that the person before him was indeed the Lord's envoy, Mr. A would have doubted if the person before him was an impostor. Your Lordship, could you repeat your command? Mr. A took a deep breath, hesitated for a few seconds, and then couldn't help but ask, though his tone remained respectful. I know you're surprised, but all of this is for a greater goal. Lynn wasn't surprised by Mr. A's reaction, he merely smiled slightly, took a sip of his red tea, and said slowly, you should know how the world views the Lord. Although to us, the Lord is the only salvation in this world, the original creator, the seven gods have deceived the world, branding the Lord as an evil god. Thus, most of the world sees the Lord and us, the Lord's followers, as wolves and tigers. The first step in persuasion is to establish a common ground and make it clear that everyone is on the same side. Of course, Lynn could have simply given Mr. A direct order. Given his status as the Lord's envoy and the divine message from the true Creator, Mr. A, as a fervent believer, would obey Lynn's command no matter what. But what fun would that be? It would be a case of following orders without understanding the reason. Even if Mr. A started doing good deeds now, there wouldn't be any fundamental change, and that wasn't what Lynn wanted. Lynn's goal was to transform Mr. A, the blood-stained apostle of the Aurora Order, into a good person in the broadest sense. This way, even if Lynn no longer kept a close eye on the members of the Aurora Order's Backland branch, he wouldn't have to worry about them causing trouble while he wasn't around. Hearing Lynn's words, Mr. A's expression immediately showed agreement, clearly recognizing the truth in Lynn's words. But now, the opportunity for change has come. Lynn put down his teacup and looked at Mr. A, his expression appropriately pious and fanatical, As he said, the Angel of Secrets has brought unprecedented good news. In the upcoming period, we may be able to cooperate with some of the seven gods, washing away the stain of being branded as an evil god from the Lord's name, allowing the Lord to become one of the recognized deities in this world. Your Lordship, is what you're saying true? Mr. A's expression became more excited than ever before. He was a true believer in the true Creator, and because of this, in some ways, he wanted the Lord to be recognized as a true God even more than the true Creator himself. Or more precisely, from the beginning, the true Creator, in Mr. A's eyes, had always been the kind of figure who could bring salvation to the world. As for sacrifices, chaos, and trouble, they were necessary for the ultimate salvation of the world. In this sense, he was indeed a fervent believer in an evil God. Do you think I would lie to you? Lynn glanced lightly at Mr. A. I wouldn't dare. Mr. A immediately lowered his head, his tone devout and respectful. The advantage of dealing with fanatics was that as long as it involved their faith, they would almost certainly comply without question. Don't be so tense, stand up. I didn't mean to reprimand you. Quote. Lynn softened his tone slightly, a classic strategy of the carrot and the stick. Once Mr. A had resumed his previous posture, Lynn continued, now you should understand why I want you to engage in charity. The stain of being branded as an evil god is about to be washed away from the Lord, so as the Lord's most loyal followers, we must not hold the Lord back in this regard. We need to show the world how benevolent and kind the Lord truly is. Lynn spoke a long string of praises for the Lord without batting an eye, then continued, in fact, establishing a charitable organization is only the first step. Besides that, Lynn's gaze fell on Mr. A's overly handsome face as he smiled and said, I also have a comprehensive promotional strategy. Please, give your command. Mr. A no longer questioned anything. After all, everything he did was to create chaos for the true Creator because the true Creator needed chaos, to cause trouble because the true Creator needed fame, whether good or bad. So when the true Creator needed to change his image and wash away past stains, he would naturally comply fully. Are you familiar with opera and theater? Lynn asked, stroking his chin. Yes, Lynn's accompanying promotional strategy for the charity work was to have the members of the Aurora Order debut as idols. This was not an impossible task. First, the members of the Aurora Order, although incompetent in many areas, were incredibly good-looking. A standout face provided a solid foundation for debuting as idols. Even if they couldn't sing or dance, they could at least be attractive. Secondly, due to the influence of Russell, the status of opera and theater actors in this era, while not very high, wasn't too low either. Although they couldn't compare with nobles and wealthy merchants, the members of the Aurora Order were not ordinary people. Pulling in a few high-status nobles to support them wouldn't be difficult, not to mention Lynn's plan to collaborate with the recognized churches of the true gods. Once that backing was established, which noble would dare cause trouble? Furthermore, influenced by Russell, newspapers and similar items had become commonplace in this era, laying the groundwork for influencing public opinion. Opera and theater performances were a significant pastime for the middle class and the nobility and wealthy in the Loan Kingdom. Some of the more outstanding theater actors often had a certain degree of influence among the middle class, nobility, and wealthy. So if the members of the Aurora Order debuted as popular idols, they could leverage this influence to do many things. For instance, fundraising, using the money raised to continue doing charity, or subtly altering public perception of the true Creator with the tacit approval of the recognized churches of the true gods. After all, in the Marvel Universe, how much military funding did Captain America secure for the military during his idle years, leaving Hydra envious? This might not be the most suitable way to transform the true Creator's image in this world, but it was definitely the most suitable method for the beautiful fools of the Aurora Order. Moreover, as a modern person, Lynn knew all too well the impact that a popular idol could have. If the Aurora Order could truly create a superstar, he might be able to reverse the true Creator's image in this era. Of course, the main reason Lynn chose to have the Aurora Order members debut as idols was that it sounded entertaining, much more fun than other methods. End of chapter. Lynn was already eager to see Mr. A singing and performing on stage, with a row of Loan Kingdom's Evernight Church members who knew his identity sitting below with subtle expressions, surrounded by Mr. A's fervent fans. Mr. A was, of course, unaware that His Excellency had plans for him to debut as an idol, so he simply reminisced for a few seconds before honestly replying, I usually watch some theatrical performances and know a few not-so-famous opera actors. If you were asked to perform in a play or an opera, do you have the confidence to do so? Lynn finally revealed his true intentions. Ah. Mr. A was undoubtedly stunned again. After several seconds, he looked at Lynn to confirm, Your Excellency, are you suggesting that I become a theater or opera actor? Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Lynn nodded frankly and began to elaborate on his idea. Opera and theater are important pastimes for the people of Loan. Famous theater and opera actors have a vast number of fans and significant influence, which is our fastest way to change the perception of the true creator. Lynn succinctly explained his plan to have them debut as idols to restore the image of the true creator. He concluded by saying, I know some influential nobles who can help you quickly integrate into the noble circles and introduce you to some of the well-known actors of today. The nobles Lynn referred to were, of course, members of the Tarot Club, specifically Miss Justice. As the daughter of Earl Hall, Audrey had seen countless plays and operas from a young age. For her, it was effortless to meet actors who were otherwise difficult for ordinary people to approach. Moreover, she knew many people in the art circles that were somewhat related to theater performances. Her connections were already in place. Lynn wasn't worried that this action would bring any danger to Audrey. The entire Aurora Order was under his control, and among the three major churches of Loan, he wasn't particularly concerned about two of them, except for the Steam Church, whose stance was still unclear. But honestly, given the artisan's timid nature, Lynn wasn't worried that they would turn against him either. In this situation, there was no danger at all for Audrey to help the Aurora Order members debut as idols. Of course, besides Audrey, Lynn had other options, such as going through the Evernight Church. Church members and nobles were closely linked in this era. Moreover, an actor highly esteemed by a high-ranking bishop would naturally gain significant publicity and advantages. It's worth mentioning that, although this was just an alternative plan, Lynn actually intended to pursue both avenues. But, Mr. A showed a troubled expression. Your Excellency, I've never studied acting. Mr. A actually didn't mind debuting as an idol for the sake of the true creator. The problem was that he didn't think he could be a good idol. He had never studied anything related to this field. Let alone performing in a play, he had never even sung before. No worries, you can learn. You have to believe in yourself. Lynn stood up, patted Mr. A on the shoulder, looking every bit like a boss selling a dream. As long as you're willing, I can arrange 10 or more teachers to instruct you, all of them professionals. Oh, right. Lynn suddenly seemed to remember something and looked at Mr. A, asking, do you mind cross-dressing? Although there were both male and female actors in this era, female actors were generally more famous. This wasn't gender discrimination, it was simply the audience's preference. Mr. A was obviously taken aback. He took a second to understand the meaning of cross-dressing, then nodded, I don't mind disguising myself for the sake of the creator. Good, that's the kind of talent the creator needs, Lynn said with an approving expression. He then sat back down on the sofa and continued, of course, I don't expect you to become a top idol by yourself. Later, give me a list of members from the Aurora Order who are either attractive or talented, and I'll see if we can form a group to debut together. Yes, Your Excellency. I'll compile the list as soon as possible, Mr. A replied respectfully, already beginning to recall the faces of his subordinates. Many were indeed good-looking, though he wasn't sure about their talents, those weren't things that could be identified at a glance. After all, the Aurora Order had never paid attention to such things before. So, not only do you want the members of the Aurora Order to switch to doing charity, but you also plan to have them debut as idols. At 15 Minx Street, after listening to Lynn's latest exploits, Klein had a surprised Pikachu face expression, clearly shocked. Yes, isn't it fitting? The members of the Aurora Order are good at nothing but looking good, so aren't they perfect for becoming idols? Lynn didn't find his actions outrageous at all. Besides, after they become idols, they can use their influence to do some good, keeping them busy and out of trouble. Isn't that great? But, Klein's expression became conflicted. Rationally, he knew that Lynn's words made sense. If the Aurora Order members truly reformed, then becoming idols might indeed be a viable path. But emotionally, this was just too absurd. Turning a secret organization into an idol group, what kind of genius brain could come up with such an idea? Mr. A and the others didn't object. Klein finally managed to ask after struggling for a while. What objection could they have? Mr. A is a devout believer of the true creator. Forget about debuting as an idol for the true creator. Even if you asked him to sacrifice himself immediately, he wouldn't blink an eye. Lynn shrugged, then suddenly looked at Klein with a mischievous smile. Of course, if you, Mr. Fool, also want to try this method of promoting your faith, I wouldn't mind helping out. No, I think slowly developing believers is just fine. The fool Klein quickly shook his head. At this point, he finally suppressed the complex emotions in his heart and asked, "Are you planning to contact Miss Justice for the nobles?" "Yes, that's my plan." Lynn nodded. "After all, among the nobles I know, her status is the highest. Besides, this is essentially a good deed, so it won't bring her any harm." Klein nodded in agreement. Although the action seemed outrageous, helping the Aurora Order members become idols and start doing good deeds was indeed a good thing and should not bring any negative consequences to Miss Justice. Klein just asked, "What about the church? They won't just sit by and watch, will they?" "That's not my concern. It's up to him to deal with it. After all, I don't have the qualifications to speak with the churches." Lynn spread his hands, speaking confidently. In any case, he is going to contact the churches for this matter. End of chapter. Monday afternoon, Backland. As the time for the tarot meeting approached, Audrey, having just finished her lunch, practiced the piano for a while. Then, mindful of the time, she planned to return to her bedroom to participate in the upcoming meeting. On her way back to her bedroom, Audrey unexpectedly noticed that there were some new documents on her father, Earl Hall's desk. This piqued her curiosity, and with Susie's help, Audrey read through them. She discovered that they were investigation reports from the East District. The reports detailed the living conditions of the lower-class people in the East District, as well as some dark aspects of Beyonders colluding with gangs. Judging by the emblem on the documents, Audrey deduced that it was very likely an investigation commissioned by the Evernight Church. But why would they give a copy to Father? My father is also a follower of the goddess. Could it be that the church wants him to provide some support to improve the terrible living conditions of the people in the East District? Audrey pondered, feeling a bit pleased. Audrey had actually long wanted to do something similar, but it had always been inconvenient. If her father undertook these tasks under the church's guidance, Audrey wouldn't need to worry too much and could participate openly to help those unfortunate people. The tarot meeting is about to start. Audrey glanced at the clock on the study wall and noticed it was nearly 3 o'clock. She reluctantly decided not to continue reading, neatly rearranged the documents, and casually grabbed a book from the side, pretending that was her purpose for being in the study. In Silver City. For Derek, these past few days were probably the most exciting and joyful of his life. 2 angels who served the Fool had descended upon Silver City, bringing with them the sun and news from the outside world. As a member of the Tarot Club and the only person in Silver City connected to the Fool, little son Derek naturally accompanied the 2 angels throughout their activities. He helped them understand Silver City and served as a bridge for communication between Silver City and the Fool's side. As for the historical records that the Angel of Secrets required, they were naturally being copied, though the process was slow due to Silver City's limited resources. Nevertheless, a considerable amount of information had been copied over the past 2 days and was gradually being handed over to the Angel of Secrets through Derek. The Angel of Secrets also brought various external items, including books that had been handed over to professional scholars for interpretation. Other items, such as food, were distributed among everyone due to their limited shelf life, although the portions were small so that as many people as possible could taste the outside world's delicacies. As a member of the patrol team, Derek was also fortunate enough to receive a piece of something called candy, allowing him to experience the sweet taste only recorded in ancient texts. To be honest, Derek had never eaten other candies before, so he couldn't discern its quality. But, as someone who had grown up eating nothing but black-faced grass or the flesh of various bizarre monsters, Derek sincerely thought that piece of candy was the best thing he had ever tasted. It would be great if the Angel of Secrets could bring more candy next time. No, how could I think like this? That's not right. Derek shook his head, but his mind couldn't help but drift back to the taste of the candy, making him swallow hard. He looked up to see the Angel of Secrets, who had been quietly reading an ancient book, glance at him with a smile. The angel smiled warmly and asked, "Hungry?" No. Derek quickly shook his head. "Don't be so quick to deny it. Let me see." Lynn searched his person, and somehow, he found another piece of candy from some hidden pocket. "Here, it might not fill you up, but it's good for replenishing some sugar." Lynn handed the candy to Derek. "No, I can't take your things." Derek instinctively shook his head. Lynn raised an eyebrow at this and directly unwrapped the candy and popped it into Derek's mouth. "Just eat it. It's just a piece of candy." "Thank you." With the candy already in his mouth, Derek had no choice but to thank him through muffled words, his eyes involuntarily narrowing in delight. "It really is delicious. He is still just a child." Lynn couldn't help but shake his head, seeing how easily Derek could be won over with just a piece of candy. Then, with a smile, he said, "Take your time. Silver City will have plenty of candy eventually, it's only a matter of time." Glug. Although little son Derek tried to eat slowly, the piece of candy was quickly gone. Nonetheless, he was quite satisfied. He looked at Lynn and couldn't help but ask, "Your Excellency, will Silver City really return to the sunlight soon?" "Of course, you must have faith in the fool." Lynn smiled as he subtly promoted the fool. After a brief pause, he added, "But before that happens, you might get to taste other foods. I mean foods that aren't just samples, but something that could become your regular diet in the future." Derek immediately looked intrigued and asked, "What kind of food?" "A special kind of mushroom. It can grow in the dark and can absorb the taste of the monster's flesh. Its flavor is somewhat like milk, fish, and beef. Whether there are other flavors, I'm not sure yet. Perhaps we can explore that in the future." Lynn recalled the terrifying mushrooms from the original text as he answered. "Mushrooms." Derek recalled the content from his textbooks, his eyes filled with anticipation. "I didn't know mushrooms could have so many flavors. The books never mentioned that." "Well, normal mushrooms don't." Lynn shook his head with a subtle expression. Looking at Derek, he thought for a moment before deciding against further explanation and instead smiled as he changed the topic, saying, "The tarot meeting is about to start. Remember to greet the Pope on my behalf. Tell him that I know what he wants to do, and I will offer the help he desires after I finish my journey in the Forsaken Land." "Okay, Your Excellency, I understand. I will relay the message to Mr. Pope." Derek nodded quickly. He wasn't surprised that the Angel of Secrets knew about the Tarot Club. It would have been strange if an angel serving the fool didn't know. Tisk. Medici, who was rarely reading the same ancient book, clicked his tongue meaningfully. This made Derek glance curiously at the Angel of War, but seeing that Medici had no further reactions, he let it go. Soon, as 3 p.m. approached, Derek's vision suddenly filled with gray mist, and a familiar voice echoed in his ears. "Prepare for the gathering." Derek immediately found a place to sit, as he always did, and began to calm his heartbeat, preparing to attend the tarot meeting. End of chapter. Since Derek had his eyes closed, he naturally didn't notice that when he was summoned by the fool to the gray fog and participated in the tarot club meeting, the Angel of Secrets, who had been reading an ancient text, suddenly became dazed, seemingly losing most of his consciousness and leaving behind only his most basic instincts. As expected, it's Saphira Castle. Medici thought as he glanced at the two individuals attending the tarot club. He wasn't surprised that the little seer was in contact with them. However, recalling Lynn's previous mention of the fool's impressive achievements, he couldn't help but curl his lips into a smile. "Amon, this time you're really in trouble. ... Good afternoon, Mr. Fool." Miss Justice Audrey's cheerful voice rang out above the gray fog, followed by greetings to the other members of the tarot club. After greeting everyone, including the Hanged Man, the Sun, the Pope, the World, and the newly joined Madam Magician from last week, Miss Justice Audrey was surprised to find that Mr. Sun seemed to be unusually emotional. It wasn't anxiety, but excitement. Why is Mr. Sun so excited? Did something happen? Curiosity welled up inside Miss Justice. Before she could ask, however, Derek couldn't hold back any longer. He first bowed to Mr. Fool, then said, Mr. Fool, thank you for sending angels to Silver City, bringing light and news of the outside world. His tone was filled with overwhelming gratitude and excitement, but Miss Justice was too stunned by the information to analyze Derek's emotions. She was almost shocked out of her spectator state. What? Mr. Fool sent an angel to Silver City, bringing light and information about the outside world. Oh my god, Mr. Fool really has angels following him. Is he planning to change the situation in Silver City? Miss Justice Audrey was so excited she nearly jumped up. If it weren't for the circumstances, she would have grabbed Little Sun and asked him everything that happened. Like her, the hanged man Alger was also shocked, nearly standing up in surprise. Alger, who had been tirelessly trying to stand out in the tarot club, was equally shaken. Mr. Fool indeed has angels following him. No, the important thing isn't just the angels but that Mr. Fool can send them to the forsaken land of the gods. Has something really changed in the real world, allowing Mr. Fool to finally mobilize more of his forces? What impact will this have on us in the Tarot Club? Unlike the optimistic and purely curious Miss Justice, the hanged man was more pessimistic. As someone who always thought deeply and speculated a lot, Alger had been trying to figure out the purpose behind Mr. Fool's establishment of the Tarot Club. He speculated that Mr. Fool, possibly due to just returning from ancient times, hadn't regained much power or was greatly restricted. His followers, those angels and attendants, might be monitored by the 7 churches, making it inconvenient for them to act freely. Thus, the Tarot Club was established. So, upon learning that Mr. Fool had sent 2 angels to Silver City, the hanged man Alger's first concern was whether this small tarot club might be disbanded or affected in some way. It shouldn't be, right? Apart from the inconvenience of his followers acting at this moment, there must be other reasons Mr. Fool established the Tarot Club. Alger speculated in his heart. Despite his concerns, he was indeed shaken by the news. Mr. Fool actually has 2 angels who can take action. I wonder if they include the one from the death pathway. If this doesn't affect the Tarot Club, it might actually be a good thing for us. The magician first didn't think as much as the others. As someone who had already become entangled with Mr. Dorr and was set to report to the Abraham family next month, she wasn't surprised at all by the fact that Mr. Fool had 2 angels under him. After all, she had witnessed firsthand that Mr. Fool, who needed her help to understand Mr. Dorr just the day before, had established contact with him the next day and even took over the management rights of the Abraham family from him. Mr. Dorr is the closest angel to becoming a god. After witnessing this, Furs already regarded Mr. Fool as a true god. So, having 2 angels by his side was nothing surprising. Although she was a bit curious about Mr. Fool's intentions in sending 2 angels to Silver City, she was more preoccupied with her upcoming trip to the Abraham family next month. I wonder what the Abraham family is like. But since I'm Mr. Fool's divine envoy and have received Mr. Dorr's recognition, they shouldn't treat me poorly, right? Furs, thoughts began to drift. The Pope Lynn simply watched with amusement. As for the world, he had no particular thoughts. After all, he was just a puppet. Meanwhile, the fool, Klein, though feeling a bit embarrassed by Derek's gratitude and praise, managed to maintain his composure, having been trained under Lynn's guidance. He smiled and responded as usual. Just a small help. I hope they didn't bring you any trouble. No, the 2 angel lords only brought light to Silver City without causing any trouble at all. Derek quickly shook his head, then added as if remembering something, oh, right, Mr. Fool, according to the plan, tomorrow we'll be exploring the Creator's Temple with the Chief and the Angel of Secrets. Don't worry, the Angel of Secrets will protect you, Klein replied calmly. Although the angel was somewhat outrageous, he was reliable in the face of real danger. Quote. Yes, thank you, Mr. Fool. Derek seemed to instinctively want to report this to Mr. Fool. After speaking, he remembered something else and looked at Lynn. Oh, right, Mr. Pope, the Angel of Secrets asked me to tell you that he knows what you're planning and will provide the help you need after finishing his journey in the forsaken land of the gods. Lynn wasn't surprised by this message, but he still feigned shock. then frowned and muttered, "He really knows what I'm up to." Then, he looked at Derek and said, "Got it." This conversation further piqued the curiosity of the other Tarot Club members. Miss Justice Audrey couldn't hold back anymore and asked, "Mr. Sun, what exactly happened?" End of chapter. "Mr. Sun, what exactly happened?" Miss Justice asked, voicing the concern shared by the other Tarot members. Even the fool, Klein, perked up his ears at this moment. Although Mr. Fool had observed a portion of Lynn's arrival in the Silver City through the gray fog, his time to watch the events live was limited. As a result, Mr. Fool was not fully aware of what transpired after the Angel of Secrets entered the Silver City. It was apparent that little son, Derek, was a straightforward person. After glancing at Mr. Fool to confirm that he had no objections, Derek began organizing his thoughts and shared recent events with the Tarot members. He recounted how Mr. Fool had issued a divine message and then mentioned how the Angel of Secrets would accompany them in exploring the true Creator's temple. After finishing his account, little son Derek paused for a moment before remembering something and added, "Oh, right, His Highness, the Angel of Secrets, also mentioned that we would meet guests from the outside world in the true Creator's temple, and the clue to leaving the Forsaken Land is with them." "Really? Mr. Sun, if that's true, that would be wonderful," Miss Justice said sincerely, looking entirely spirited and fully engaged in the conversation, far from her usual spectator state. This was not surprising. Although Derek's storytelling skills were not the best, the content was so fascinating that even his plain narration was enough to excite anyone. The Angel of Secrets granting a miniature sun to the Silver City, the truth behind the true Creator's fall, such revelations were more stimulating to the curious and mystery-loving Audrey than the finest coffee. In contrast to Audrey's excitement and joy, the hanged man Alger clearly thought of more. On one hand, Alger was astonished by the grand gesture of the Angel of Secrets, who had directly bestowed a miniature sun upon the Silver City, an act Alger could only imagine a deity accomplishing. On the other hand, Alger was shaken by the truth revealed by the War Angel. The true Creator worshipped by the Silver City had fallen due to the betrayal of three angels: the Wind Angel, the Wisdom Angel, and the White Angel. Alger, who was always prone to thinking and linking things together, couldn't help but speculate about the identities of these three angels. Could it really be the Lord of Storms? No, Alger, you can't think like that. The hanged man quickly suppressed this blasphemous thought, only to feel a wave of irony. He wasn't a truly devout follower of the Lord of Storms, or he wouldn't have had such near heretical thoughts. But Alger's hand, hidden under the bronze table, trembled slightly with a mix of fear, excitement, and anticipation. He had finally uncovered the truth at the level of the gods. This sense of seemingly being closer to the divine was indescribably thrilling for Alger, fueling his ambition to advance further. Alger was indeed ambitious. Even though he was just an ordinary mid-sequence Beander, he aspired to become a Sequence 4, to become an Archbishop of the Church of the Lord of Storms. And at this moment, Alger felt he might need to set his sights even higher. Perhaps he should strive to become an angel under Mr. Fool. Alger's heart pounded at the thought of this nearly impossible goal. He took a deep breath to calm himself, then looked at Derek. After considering his words for a few seconds, he asked, "Has the Angel of Secrets already visited the Temple of the Fallen Creator?" Yes. Despite his excitement, the still rational Alger had noticed one crucial point. How did the Angel of Secrets know about the guests from the outside world in the true Creator's temple? Derek instinctively wanted to answer but hesitated just before speaking. Should he really reveal information about the Angel of Secrets' abilities? Lynn, the Pope, quickly noticed Derek's hesitation. Unsure whether to feel sorry for the boy's naivety or amused by it, he decided to speak up. Well, the Angel of Secrets possesses the ability of prophecy. With that explanation, the Tarot members immediately understood, but they also thought of another question: how did the Pope know about the Angel of Secrets' prophetic ability? Recalling Derek's earlier mention of the message the Angel of Secrets had asked him to pass on to the Pope, the hanged man Alger glanced at Lynn several times. Alger had sensed from the start that the Pope was not ordinary, just like the world, who had joined the Tarot Club around the same time. This had initially triggered a strong sense of competitiveness in Alger, but after the Pope casually revealed that he seemed to know a great deal about angels, Alger had given up competing with him. Being the perceptive man he was, Alger had long suspected that the Pope had a deep connection with some angel. And now, this had been more or less confirmed. Perhaps the Pope was chosen by Mr. Fool for the Tarot Club due to his connection with the Angel of Secrets. Alger speculated, though a part of him remained confused. But, why did the Pope seem less than respectful towards the Angel of Secrets? Could it be just my misunderstanding? Miss Justice, however, was not thinking as deeply as Alger. Her eyes lit up as she whispered in admiration, "How impressive." She wondered which pathway the Angel of Secrets followed. The ability of prophecy greatly appealed to Audrey. If she had been given the choice back then, she might have chosen a pathway with such an ability. However, the spectator pathway was also very suitable for me. Although it lacked offensive power, it fits me well. Audrey reassured herself while glancing at Lynn again. After hesitating for a few seconds, she asked, "Mr. Pope, you seem to be very familiar with His Highness, the Angel of Secrets." Audrey knew she shouldn't ask such a personal question, but since it seemed that the Pope wasn't trying to hide anything, and her curiosity was overwhelming, she couldn't help herself. She then noticed a peculiar expression on the Pope's face, a mix of slight disdain, helplessness, and a clear sense of course, we're familiar. We are indeed familiar, at least, he's very familiar with me, Lynn, fully in his acting mode, responded as he massaged his temples. But I can't disclose the specifics of our relationship. End of chapter. Apologies, Mr. Pope. I was being presumptuous, Miss Justice quickly apologized, though her curiosity only grew stronger. What exactly is the relationship between Mr. Pope and the Angel of Secrets? However, their free exchange of thoughts ended there, as it was now time for Mr. Fool's reading session. Although she was filled with various curiosities and doubts, Miss Justice did not forget her main objective. She subsequently requested a private conversation with Mr. Fool, submitting 5 pages of Russell's diary. She did this because she didn't want Magician Furs to discover her identity. The latter had established contact with Mr. Fool due to her, so to avoid suspicion, Miss Justice temporarily didn't want Magician Furs to realize that Mr. Fool needed Russell's diary, at least not for a while. At this moment, Miss Justice Audrey had no idea that the Magician Furs, who in her eyes was introduced to Mr. Fool because of her recommendation, had already knelt and become a devout believer of the Fool. Furthermore, next month, Furs would serve as the Fool's divine emissary and head to the Abraham family. In a certain sense, at this moment, the connection between Magician Furs and Mr. Fool was even deeper than that of Miss Justice, who had not yet changed her faith. Mr. Fool, who was well aware of all this, naturally did not reveal anything. He gladly agreed to Miss Justice's request and, using the cards of blasphemy he recently acquired, subtly showed off in front of her. Just to clarify, the cards of blasphemy in Mr. Fool's possession at this time still included the Red Priest card. A certain Mr. Sotos, after studying the Black Emperor card, forgot to swap the cards back. But this didn't really affect Klein. As Miss Justice digested the many shocking revelations from this tarot gathering, Klein began reading the 5 pages of Russell's diary she submitted. Logically speaking, now that Klein had established contact with Russell himself, he no longer needed the diary to understand him. However, since Russell and a certain Angel of Secrets shared a similar habit of speaking in riddles, Klein couldn't stop collecting Russell's diary. Or rather, besides Russell's diary, Klein was hoping to see if he could also collect Lynn's diary. And perhaps it was fate, but this time, among the diary pages submitted by Miss Justice, 2 pages belonged to Lynn. The first entry was written as follows. X year X month X day. Today is a good day. Not only did I give Alice to tutor a good beating, but I also petted the head of Antigonus. Klein's pupil contracted. Klein was not unaware of the outrageous deeds Lynn had committed in the 4th epic. He had heard from Mr. Dorr about how Lynn had beaten Alice to tutor and how he had bullied Antigonus, who was then half a fool. But hearing Mr. Dorr briefly mention these things was entirely different from seeing Lynn carefully document the details in his diary. Especially when Klein read the latter part of this entry, where Lynn described the texture of Antigonus's head in detail and mentioned, "I was just thinking about whether to turn Antigonus into a pet dog. Why was he shaking so much?" The sense of absurdity became even more pronounced. Wait a minute, you're thinking of turning someone into a pet dog, and you don't think they should be scared. Mr. Fool had a lot to say, but with the help of his clown abilities, he kept a straight face and continued reading the next diary entry. X year X month X day, tried to catch that snake of Mercury, Will. He dared to avoid me. HMPH, tomorrow I'll take Bethel to block the door of his house. The name Will was unfamiliar to Klein since Bethel didn't give every detail when describing Lynn's outrageous deeds, perhaps because Mr. Dorr felt embarrassed to admit that he was an accomplice. At any rate, Mr. Dorr hadn't mentioned this incident involving helping Lynn catch Will. However, Mr. Dorr did explain during their lessons that the sequence names of the Wheel of Fortune pathway, so Klein knew that the Snake of Mercury was a sequence 1 of the pathway. So, this Will must be the enemy of Mr. Ouroboros, which explains why he was hiding from Lynn. Klein, while recalling his previous encounter with a Wheel of Fortune King of Angels, glanced at the next diary entry. X year X month X day, successfully blocked Will with Bethel. The door pathway is really useful, no wonder people on this pathway are nearly wiped out in the future. Ahem, I digress. Will's attitude wasn't bad. Since he wasn't avoiding me during this era, I'll forgive his previous rudeness. But as compensation, I commissioned him to help me with something. I asked him to help spread my diaries, hoping that these diaries would reach me in another era. Sigh, I wonder when I will merge with myself in that era. It's so weird to only be in contact with my divine half. I'm doomed if I lose my humanity. If Klein merely sympathized with the Snake of Mercury tormented by Lynn after reading the first half of this diary entry, the second half made him nearly frown. What does it mean, hoping that these diaries would reach me in another era? If this could be explained by Lynn's prophetic abilities preparing materials to awaken his memories, the phrase, only being in contact with my divine half is so strange, made Klein's heart skip a beat. Contact. What kind of contact? Lynn should have only split into 2 in this era, right? According to Mr. Dorr, Lynn was still a complete individual in the 4th epoch. So how was he in contact with his divine half? Or could it be? A sudden hypothesis arose in Klein's mind, a hypothesis that seemed unbelievable to him. Could Lynn sense himself in different eras? Could he even establish a connection with himself across eras? Klein had encountered such concepts in literary works before, but it was hard for him to imagine such abilities existing in reality. Is this really possible? To connect with oneself across eras, even experiencing the same sensations? If that were true, wouldn't it mean Lynn could change events that had already happened? After all, for the Lynn of another era, those events are in the future. As he thought about this, subtle details flashed through Klein's mind, like Lynn's attempts to alter the true creator, who had fallen into madness, or Azek's case, where although he was rescued from the god of death, he still suffered from amnesia and had conflicting memories. Or even Mr. Dorr, who sometimes seemed hesitant to speak. Connecting all these details, Klein's mind began to lean towards a certain conclusion. If it weren't for his clown ability, Mr. Fool might not have been able to keep a straight face at this moment. End of chapter.